Hi everybody. So today we are going to begin with the international economics concepts, which is the fifth module of the revised NTA syllabus. So out of that we begin with the mercantilism concept. So mercantilism has been developed from 16th century and it was in existence from 16th to 18th century, and whose main aim was to maximize the trade of nation. So maximizing the trade of nation in a way by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. So this is a form of government regulation to restrict international trade. So when we just discuss about the mercantilism, I would like to talk about the concept of Bullionism and Colbertism also. So Bullionism is also another term used for the mercantilism because of its aim of maximizing trade in the form of accumulating gold and silver. So at that time, gold and silver was considered as a base for wealth. So mercantilism is otherwise Bullionism, and it is also known as Colbertism because of the name of the finance minister in the term of Louis XVI. So those are the other two terms of mercantilism. So the main point which we have to keep in mind when we discuss about the mercantilism is it is restricting the international trade through government regulations or government intervention. And in other way, it is a zero-sum game, where gain of one nation is the loss of other nation. So this is the main content of mercantilism. So let's move to the previous year questions of mercantilist ideology. So when theories of international trade are concerned, the second topic which comes is absolute cost advantage. So it comes as a critique to the mercantilism. So mercantilism, as the name is derived from by the merchants. So absolute cost advantage is put forward by the father of economics, Adam Smith, and he, through his work of an inquiry into the wealth of nation, proved that trade is not a zero-sum game, rather it's a positive sum game. So how? So in the zero-sum game, the gain of one nation is only possible with the loss of other nation, whereas Adam Smith proved that international trade is a voluntary exchange where both nations can gain. It is not like the gain of one nation is possible only with the loss of other. Instead, international trade is a voluntary exchange where both nations can gain. So now we are going to the definition of absolute advantage. So absolute advantage refers to ability of a country to produce a greater quantity of goods or service than competitors using the same amount of resources. So here, absolute cost advantage is determined by labor productivity. So when the wealth of nations are considered, here it gives more importance to the goods or service available to the citizen rather than the gold reserves which we consider in mercantilism. So that is the major difference. The goods and services available to the citizen is the main concern when it comes to the absolute cost advantage or the wealth of nation presented by the Adam Smith. So here the country will always export the goods or service that is more productive than the other country and import the good or service which the other country is better than our country. So that is the process happening in absolute cost advantage. Export the goods or service which is more productive in our country and import the goods or service which other country is more better than our country. We just mentioned about the items which are exported and imported when it comes to the absolute cost advantage. So here the trade is mainly based on the productivity difference. So what is being exported and what is being imported is based on the productivity difference. And what determines this productivity difference? So as we have told that they will export the goods and service with higher productivity. So when a nation is concerned, they will export the goods and services which they can produce in a better manner using the available resources, raw material and geographical aspects. So a nation will always export a good which they can have a better productivity using the available resources. And other way, a nation will only import the good which they cannot produce with the available resources or which will be like expensive if they produce with their own country. So a nation will always import a good which with the lower productivity, import a good which they cannot make use of the available resources in a proper manner. So we know that the failure of the mercantilist theory led to the formation of absolute cost theory, and here the scope of international trade in absolute cost advantage theory is out through the productivity difference. So when we just consider two countries A and B, A will always export the items or goods and service with higher productivity for A, and they will always import the item which it is having lower productivity from the country B. So we know that a country may be having requirements of various products. So suppose A is focusing on a single product, it may also need of some other items which if they try to domestically produce those items, they may face absolute cost disadvantage. So A will always stress or focus on the items which it can have higher productivity using its available resources, and they will import the items which they are having lower productivity with the available resource. So with that, we see a switch of zero-sum game to the positive sum game. So here in the zero-sum game, it is only they focus on the export. There is no scope of the international trade because there is no scope of the productivity differences. But when you move to the absolute cost advantage, here both the nations can gain. So it's a voluntary exchange between both the nations where both the nations can gain. So let's move to the assumptions of absolute cost advantage. So basically, we are having the assumptions. The first one is it's a 2 into 2 into 1 model. So in absolute cost advantage, we are having 2 countries, 2 commodities, and 1 factor model. So it's always assumed that there are 2 countries exist when we are having this absolute cost advantage theory, and always we are dealing with 2 commodities alone. And the other most important point is when it comes to the factor of input. So usually we know that when we are considering the factors, we always take labor and capital. But in the initial theories, where absolute cost advantage, comparative cost advantage and all, we are only having 1 unit of input, that is labor. But at the same time, when it comes to the modern theories, we will be having 2 into 2 into 2 model, where we are having 2 countries, 2 commodities and 2 factors. So from the UGC examination point of view, that is pretty important. So the assumptions of absolute cost advantage is having only 2 into 2 into 1 model, that is 2 country, 2 commodity and 1 unit of input. And the second assumption is labor as the only input. Just as we mentioned in the first assumption, the input that we use for the absolute cost advantage is labor alone. We don't take the capital in any of the stages. Labor is the only input that we consider in absolute cost advantage, and when we consider the productivity difference also, it's based on the labor productivity. And the third assumption is single currency. So we know that we are exporting and importing goods in terms of the productivity difference. So when we export and import, we assume that we are having a single unit of currency throughout the terms of trade and throughout the trading process. And the fourth assumption is the homogeneous factor of production. So what is the factor of production used here? It's labor. So when labor is considered, it is homogeneous. We don't have any specialized unit of labor. Whatever labor which are provided, all the labor units are considered homogeneous. So moving to the fifth assumption, that is units of production are divisible in compact units. So in the fourth assumption, we told that labors are homogeneous and there is no specialized labor. So as a continuation to that, here since there is no specialized labor and since the available labor are homogeneous, it can be easily divided into compact units among the according to the requirement. So since it is homogeneous and there is no specialization, all the units of production are divisible in compact units. And the next one is all factors of production are fully employed. So we know that when it comes to the classical theories, the full employment resources is a common assumption which is considered. So whatever factors of production are available, it is fully employed. There is full employment of resources. And the last assumption is no government restriction. So we see the change from in the mercantilism. We know that there was government restriction when it comes to the international trade. They don't encourage the free trade. They just encourage only the exports. They were restricting the imports. But when it comes to the absolute cost advantage, here we are having the laissez-faire policy where there is no government restriction regarding the trade. It is basically free trade. So the last two assumptions are basically the basic assumptions of classicals. We know the scope of international trade in absolute cost advantage is the productivity difference. So now let us discuss what are the factors affecting the efficiency of production in absolute cost advantage. So when efficiency of production is considered, there are certain factors like availability of raw material, geographical aspects or the natural resources, etc. So these are the factors which determines the efficiency in the production. And out of that, when we take the absolute cost advantage, it is the labor productivity difference that affects the efficiency. And we know when we discuss the assumptions every time, we told the labor is the single unit of production where we are having homogeneous productivity. And so it's the productivity difference in the labor is the reason that affect the efficiency in absolute cost advantage. So let us check it with a numerical example. So here we have got two country, two commodities and one unit of factor. So just like 2 into 2 into 1 model. So here we know if India is producing both bread and cloth, India can produce 5 units of bread and 10 units of cloth. Whereas the country B, the other country, England, is producing both bread and cloth. England can produce 5 units of cloth and 10 units of bread. So from the initial observation itself, it is evident that it need more labor productivity or more effort for the labor for India to produce bread rather than cloth. So it is better for India to focus on production of cloth. So that may help to have a better terms of trade. So when India is concerned, it is better for India to specialize in the production of cloth since it requires only less effort compared to the production of wheat. So we see the ratio of exchange, it's seen that X is equal to 2Y. So it needs double effort than the production of cloth to produce the bread. And when it comes to England, it is better for England to specialize in the bread rather than the cloth because 1 unit of labor is able to produce 10 unit of bread, whereas the same one unit of labor is producing only 5 unit of cloth. So it is better for India to specialize in cloth and it is better for England to specialize in bread. So this is a case where there is no international trade takes place, where both the countries is having domestic production of both the commodities. So at that time we will see that India will have a 15 units of production, 5 units of bread and 10 units of cloth, and England will have 15 units of production where 10 units of bread and 5 units of cloth. As a total, we will have this 30 units of products for when the global production is considered. So this is a case where there is no international exchange of goods and service, where we have only domestic production and domestic exchange. So now let us see what will happen if they start specializing in a particular commodity. So how the global production will change when a country starts specializing in a commodity where they can adjust according to the efficiency of labor productivity. Now we are going to compare the difference in the global production when there is domestic production as well as the international production take place. So in the previous case we have seen that what is the total global production when there is only domestic production taking place. So now we are moving to the case what will happen to the global production when there is international production taking place. So earlier we realized that India is it is better for India to specialize in the production of cloth, and it was better for England to specialize in the production of bread. So if they start specializing in these particular commodities, how the total overall production will change. So now let us take the two countries, India and England. So earlier India was producing 5 units of bread, but now in this case India is not at all going to produce bread, but the 1 unit of labor which was used for the production of bread is going to be put in the production of cloth, and there the earlier production of cloth, which was 10, will be increased to 20. Okay, so the same case in England, where we are going to specialize in the production of bread. So earlier case we know that England was using 1 unit of labor for the production of cloth and 1 unit of labor for the production of bread. So the 1 unit of labor which was used for the production of cloth in England is going to be put in the production of bread in the case of international production. So that 1 unit is going to be put here, and at that time in the production of bread in England is also going to be increased from 10 to 20. So the 1 unit which was producing 5 units of cloth is increased to 10 units of bread when we start specializing in that particular product. So see the change in the total production. Earlier it was 5 plus 10, 15, and 10 plus 5, 15, where the total was 13. But now with the international production, when the countries are starting to specializing in particular commodities, the total production is turning to 0 plus 20 and 20 plus 0, that is 20 and 20, which is equal to 40. So overall increase of 10 units in the overall production. So if we are only having domestic production, the total productivity will be 30. The same time, if you are having the specialization in the production, and if you are having international production, the total productivity will become 40. So there will be an increase of 10 units. That is the net gain of the international trade. So from all these cases, it is clear that the labor productivity and the efficiency in the labor productivity is very, very important. So the next concept what we are going to discuss is about the labor theory of value, which has been used in the absolute cost advantage and which will be used in the comparative cost advantage also. So when we discuss about the labor theory of value, we will learn about its advocates and all other further details that we will come in the upcoming session. So let us discuss about the labor theory of value. So the labor theory of value is associated with the absolute cost advantage and comparative cost advantage. So when we consider with the examination point of view, this is a very important concept which has been asked in several times, and especially the labor theory of value and its association with these concepts. So we know that this when we consider both of these theory, absolute cost advantage as well as comparative cost advantage, both operates in association with labor theory of value. And the advocates of the labor theory of value are Karl Marx, Adam Smith and Ricardo. So Adam Smith, as we have already mentioned, the one who have developed the absolute cost advantage concept, and David Ricardo, which we will be going to, we will be discussing in the upcoming session, who have developed the comparative cost advantage. So let's see how the labor theory of value is operating in the absolute cost advantage case. So here we know that the 10 units of cloth is being produced by 1 unit of labor. So the same 10 units of bread can be produced only by the double units of labor used for production of cloth in case of India. So the same unit need more amount of labor. So this difference, the difference in the cost of production and the price in the production of bread as well as the cloth is based on the labor theory. So we know that bread need more cost of production because here bread need more units of labor than the cloth. So the cloth, the cost as well as price is changed based on the labor units. In case of labor theory of value, we assume labor as the only relevant factor of production, and as well as the economic value of goods and services is determined by the total amount of labor required to produce it. So the total amount of labor required to produce the goods and service determines the economic value. So when the amount of labor request changes, the cost and price also changes, as well as thus the economic value also changes. So as a whole, this theory we have mentioned, it's borrowed from Karl Marx, and Adam Smith as well as David Ricardo have used the theory in their respective concepts. Now we are going to discuss questions from the portions that so far covered. So we have already covered mercantilist and absolute cost advantage along with the labor theory of value concepts. So let's see which all are the questions asked from these areas. So this is a question which was asked in July 2018, paper 2, and the question number 24. According to mercantilist, trade is a options, positive sum game, infinite sum game, zero sum game and negative sum game. So there is nothing much to think. The answer is zero sum game. As we have already discussed, in the mercantilist, they have following the government regulations in such a way they encourage exports and discourage imports. So whether that affects the terms of trade. When a country is encouraging exports in a manner, they want to accumulate the gold and they don't want to lose the accumulation of the wealth. So that is how mercantilists operate. So when the gain of one nation is possible only through the loss of the other nation, it cannot be regarded as the positive sum game or other forms of trade. So it is clearly a zero sum game because in mercantilist, gain of one nation is possible only with the loss of other nation. The next question is based on the labor theory of value concept, and the question is asked in December 2012, paper 2 and question number 11. Its labor theory of value was propounded by options A. Adam Smith, B. David Ricardo, C. Knox, Merdel and Zolo, and D. Fair, Rane and Knox. So the answer is A and B, that is Adam Smith and Ricardo. So we know what is the labor theory of value, because we know we are assuming labor as the only relevant input for the factor of production when we consider the concepts of Adam Smith as well as the Ricardo, and we consider the economic value of goods and services are determined by the units of labor used to produce it. So when the units of labor is determining the economic value of goods and services, and that concept is used by Adam Smith and Ricardo. And originally the theory was developed by Karl Marx, and it is borrowed from Karl Marx by Adam Smith and Ricardo. So sometimes we may have the option of Karl Marx also in the question. In that case, Karl Marx is also associated with labor theory of value. The main advocates are Karl Marx, Adam Smith and David Ricardo.